Hey mechatronics students, this is Andrew Dowlin. This video is going to be about cutting single point threads using the turning lathe. So a couple things we need to start with is to figure out a plan. What kind of threads are we going to cut? What size are they? And then look up some information about the threads. So let's get started by taking a look at the machinist handbook. All right. So went off and grabbed my old trusty machinist handbook. This has a mountain of information in it, and specifically what we're interested in today is that we're going to cut a 1/2 inch 13 thread. So this here is a 1/2 inch bolt. It has 13 threads per inch, and we need to know a little bit more about what we'd call the major diameter. Basically, what is the outside dimensions of this from the top of a tooth to the top of a tooth, and the minor diameter. What is the measurement from the root of the tooth to the root of the opposite tooth? So we're going to look that information up in the tables in the machinist handbook. So let's take a peek at this. Let's see. We'll use this camera angle. So here I am. I guess this is page... let me just dial some things in here so I can see a little bit better. Okay, so I'm on page 1657 of the machinist handbook, and this table is for united screw threads, and specifically I'm going to be going over here and looking for a 1/2 inch 13 UNC thread. The thread class we're going to be cutting is 2A. So when I look this up, it tells me that the major diameter should be 0.4985 to 0.4876, and then the minor diameter should be 0.406. So I'm going to write that stuff down. Alright, we're going to zoom out just a little bit here. Okay, so this is what we're planning to cut today. The minor diameter that we looked up was 0.406. Okay, and then the major diameter started off at 0.4985, so somewhere in that region, and it went down. I gotta look this up again. 4985. The lowest it could go was 4876. Okay, so that's kind of the limits of this diameter when we start off. So a couple of other things. This is a 1/2 inch dash 13, so 1/2 inch diameter. You can see it's a little bit short of that. And then 13 threads per inch. And the other details, United National Course. And then finally, the class of fit would be 2A. The A signifies that it's an external thread. The 2 is a class of fit that we're shooting for. So those are some of the details that we need to understand. And I've already got some stock that's ready to go behind me that's been set up for this. So I've already machined the minor diameter to about 0.406. There's a little ledge here. And then this shaft here is where we're going to cut the threads, and that has been set up to, it measures about 0.497, so 497 is within the range of tolerance permitted here. So we're in good shape. Now we need to talk about those 13 threads per inch. So on the front side of the metal lathe, and if your lathes are different, just consult the manual, take a peek at it. You're going to find a table, and this one is TPI, threads per inch. And in this case, it's got a big table that we can look up over here. We're shooting for 13 threads per inch. That's UNC 1/2-13, 13 threads per inch. And as you can see here, it's got a bunch of letters, LT, and the other one for 13 is, gotta look this up, B and D. Okay, LT, B and D. All right, so we're gonna back out with the camera here and take a look at the entire gearbox setup. Okay, so the first thing it said was B and D. So we've got that set up. We're in good shape. The other one was the letter L, and that's where this knob is set. And on my machine, I'm missing a knob, but it is set up for L and T. So we consult the table here, and then we figure out the details. Now, one other thing worth mentioning in here is the gearbox setup. If I zoom in on this, the lathe actually has some change gears, they're called. So in this case, if we're looking at the inch TPI, it calls for a 32 tooth gear, 120 tooth gear, and 127 tooth gear. All right, we need to understand that depending on what's happening here, the lathe comes with some what they call change gears. So we'll take a look at that. I know I've got the change gears set up so that we can cut inch threads. So just let me pause for a moment. Okay, so I've removed the cover from the side of the lathe head, and you're going to see a bunch of gears. These are the change gears, and the lathe comes with a bunch of other gear sets that can be swapped out of different sizes, and it all depends on what the number of threads per inch or the thread pitch that you're looking to cut. So in this case, we do have the right gears set up in here, but one would have to loosen up some nuts, some other hardware here, remove these gears if you needed to, and swap them out for the other gears. And identifying them is a little bit of a pain, but we're in good shape here. We know that these are the correct change gears for our threads per inch that we're looking for to cut 13 threads per inch. So we're good to go on our change gears. Okay, one of the first things we're going to do is to, just for demonstration purposes, is to color this up with using a dry erase marker. So I've got the lathe set up. Let me change the speeds to its lowest speed, and we're just going to go ahead and start this up. And I'll just use a marker here to get a mark all the way across here, giving us a nice visual. Okay, so I'm digging that. Again, that's just for visualization purposes. Now, the type of cutter that we're using for this, looks like I need to do an adjustment, but it's important the cutter that we're using to cut threads is a 60-degree angle on this. And the vise that we have, the top slide, is set up to run at a 60-degree angle. So I think we can get a better look at that over here. This top slide has been set at a little bit less than a 60-degree angle, and we're going to be cutting the threads by moving this in and out. Okay, so again, this top slide set at 60 degrees. That's an important part of what we're aiming for here. So I think we're about ready to start cutting threads, but let's get a couple things dialed in. So first of all, the cross slide, actually I did need to change one thing in the setup, so let me pause for a moment. Okay, I ran out of room here, so I had to lengthen how far the thread cutting tool comes out so that it cleared here. So what I recommend is that we drive the cross slide in until that threading tool is getting close. And actually, for my purposes, I like to have the cross slide, the dial set so it reads at 0. So this guy, I've got it right set up on the inch slide. It's reading right at the 0 mark, and that's important. So right here it says 0, and we're going to use that later. So we'll switch back to our top camera here, and what we're going to do is slide the carriage back and forth and then slowly push in the top slide until we get a line that's scribed on our part. All right, trying to see if I can catch this. Okay, and I'm just starting to get that line, so I'm pretty happy with that. And I'll rotate so you guys can see, holy, that slowest speed. Can you guys see a line that's been scribed in there by the tool? So we know that the thread cutting tool is just touching that surface, and that's where we'd like to see it for our first cut here. So just for a sanity check. Okay, now when we're making threads, we're going to take advantage of that automatic feed, and we also have to be watching this guy here. This is the thread dial, and the easiest way to watch that thread dial or set it up is we have to engage that at a certain number, so we make sure the threads start at the same point every time. Now we can look up in the manual and find out exactly which numbers we can engage on, because sometimes depending on what threads you're cutting, you can engage on odd numbers or even numbers, but I find it's always safe, no matter what style you're cutting, if you engage on pick a number and engage on that always. So I'm going to pick number 1 on the thread dial and always engage the cross slide, the half nut, using that. Okay, so we're going to fire up the lathe. It's set up at the very slowest speed, and we're going to go ahead and fire this up, and we're going to be watching our thread dial and waiting for that to come around to the number 1. When that's in the number 1, we're going to engage the cross or the half nut. So there we're at 7, 1, there's 8. Here comes the number 1. When those 2 marks line up, I'm going to engage. Now that's going to send the engage the material cutting across here. So we're going to see that it's cutting lines, and I want to watch as it's cutting across there. And once it gets into the gutter, that little relief cut that we put in there, then we're going to stop it. Okay? That's good stuff. So you can see that we've got a very lightly scribed line all the way across here, and it should be at 13 threads per inch. That's what we're shooting for. And now I'm just going to go back to this image, and we had our cross slide set at 0, 0. I'm going to back our cross slide up and then scoot the whole carriage over back to the beginning of where our thread was, and then re-engage that cross slide at 0. Okay, so we're all set. This is back where it was, and at this point we're going to adjust the top slide in about 0.010 of an inch. Okay, we're going to repeat these steps over and over and over again, where we're dialing, cutting the threads across there. And I'm going to pause for just a second here. All right, so we have engaged the top slide. It's going to cut 0.010 deeper this time, and we repeat those same steps. So we're going to be watching the thread dial, and that showed up in the bottom of the corner there. And here we go. We'll fire up the lathe. This is top slide's been engaged, waiting for that number 1 to come around on our thread dial, and then we're going to engage the half nut. And there we go. We're cutting a little bit deeper thread this time, so a little bit more materials being taken off. And that blue marker really helps to show the threads being cut. You can tell the difference between where we've cut and where we haven't. Once it pops into the gutter, we stop. Again, we at this time we're going to back up the cross slide, move the carriage back to the start of the threads, put our cross slide back to our 0 mark, And now we're going to move the top slide in 0.1 of an inch and get ready to cut our next thread. So here we go. Our third pass, waiting for the number 1 to come around on the thread dial. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to put some cutting fluid across our threads here. Okay, here comes the number 1. We'll engage the half nut onto the lead screw, and there. Now we're going to be cutting. The third pass is going a little bit deeper, about 0.1 deeper than the previous. And we just keep repeating these steps over and over until our thread is formed. Wait for it to fall into the gutter. And again, we're backing up the cross slide. Move the carriage over. Put our cross slide back to our 0 mark. We're engaging. This is back to the 0 mark. The top slide we can move in 0.1 of an inch again. And now we're waiting for the thread dial to come around one more time. So waiting for the thread dial to show up as a number 1. It's at 5, so sometimes it takes a while. And we're running this at the slowest speed, so it's all good. Couple more clicks away from where we want it to be. Here comes our number 1. We're about to engage the half nut onto the lead screw and cut our 4th pass. Alright, so we're about to the end of our 4th pass. I'll disengage the lead screw, back it up, and we just repeat those steps a whole bunch of times. Alright, getting ready for our 5th pass. The same procedure repeats over and over. So I've got my cross slide back to 0, and again we advance the top slide by about 0.1 using the markers there, and we make another pass. And the number 1 was right there. Oh, slick. That seldom happens. Okay, and here we go making, I think this is our 5th pass. And you get the feel for how this works. It's kind of a slow process, but it's also kind of rewarding to, once you get everything dialed in and it works slick. Waiting for it to fall in the gutter, disengage the half nut. Again, my procedure here is kind of repetitive. We back off the top slide, move the carriage over, bring our cross slide back to our 0 mark, and then we feed another 0.1 in with the top slide. Wait for the number 1 to come around on our thread dial. This one's taken a long time to zip around. The last one I got really lucky. And then we're going to re-engage and cut another 0.1. So this step just kind of repeats and repeats and repeats until we get closer and closer to that final thread. Here comes the number 1, engage. And we're seeing less and less blue, which means we're probably getting close to our final thread size here. Alright, back off the cross slide, move the carriage back. Move the cross slide back to 0. Adjust the top slide in. I think we're getting closer to our final, so I think this will be my last pass that I'm going to take, and then we'll check some things. So we're going to wait for that number 1 to come around, apply a little bit of cutting fluid. You can still see some blue, which indicates to me that we've got a little bit of material we can remove yet. Typically the point of the thread would eliminate any of the blue color. About ready to engage for another pass. Thread dial almost there. Here comes the number 1, and engage the half nut. Back it up. Okay, we're going to check out and see how things are. All right, it's looking pretty good. One of the things, if you have the nut that you know that's going to be going on to this exact thread, it's a worthwhile exercise to just check your fit while it's all on the machine. So to do that, we just take the tailstock away, grab the nut, and see, you know, will it start? And obviously not. So we can re-engage the tailstock, make sure it's clamped up and nice and solid, tight against the part. And we're going to take another 10 thousandths because we're not quite there. So, same procedure, repeating over and over and over. Get our dial back to 0 on the cross slide. Okay, and then we'll engage our top slide another 10 thousandths and take another cut. Here comes our number 1 on the thread dial. Engage. Back up. And again, I think I'm going to check the fit because I'm seeing less and less blue color. So we'll grab our nut and see what we've got. Oh, it's almost starting on there. So I think I'm going to take it down to about 5 thousandths this time instead of where I was at. Re-engage everything. Okay, we'll get this guy set up. Back to 0. Like I said, this time on the top slide, I'm only going to go in 5 thousandths because I know I'm getting really close to our final dimensions. And also, the less we take off on our final pass, we'll get a little bit cleaner cut. So here comes the number 1 on the dial. Engage. All right, let's see if that was enough. Oh boy, it's just starting to come. All right, so it's getting very, very close to our final dimension, and that's the way I like to do it with a test fit like that. Help me make sure that it's all right in the right spot. Actually running out of room here. This got a little bit closer to that end than I was hoping, which is all right. Just got to pay attention. Okay, so again, we're just going to take off another 5 thousandths this time, and then I think it will slide right on. So a nice light cut, lots of cutting fluid. Final cut. Here we go. Comes the number 1 on the dial. Engage. I'm getting a really nice shaving off of this. Okay. I think that's going to be it. We'll find out when we try to thread the nut on there. Oh, look at that. It started, and then it went, it's getting a little tight. So I may have to take one more pass. But you guys are getting the idea here of what's happening. What the heck? We'll go for it. One more little pass, and I think this is going to be done. There's our 0 mark. And we'll engage another probably 4 thousandths. I mean, it's really close to where it needs to be here. Engage. One more pass. And here comes number 1. All right. Hopefully that is our last pass. And we've got a beautiful thread. There we go. All right. Pretty happy with that. So there we go. That was how to cut threads on the lathe. You know, generally this isn't something we do a whole lot of unless it's a very odd thread. If it was just cutting a 1/2 inch thread like we just did, probably do it by some other means. But pretty happy with this. So there we go. That's the end of thread cutting video. Good luck to you guys, and I think we'll have some different threads for you guys to cut when you actually go to do it in the lab. A little bit bigger ones, making it easier to get in and out, but it'll be fun to practice. So until next time, we'll catch you later.